Welcome to episode 6 of Sibling Rivalry on India and the World podcast. So far, we have talked about the partition and the deep distrust that has been festering between India and Pakistan ever since. In the previous episode, we traced the divergent paths that India and Pakistan had set upon by the end of their first decade after independence. Towards the end of that episode, I had mentioned that one of the factors contributing to the rise of power of Pakistan Army was that it had formed a direct connect with the US government, bypassing its own political leadership. Today we take a closer look at the US-Pakistan relations in the larger context of superpower diplomacy and Cold War geopolitics playing out in the subcontinent. We will explore how these superpower rivalries collided with the bitter regional animosity between India and Pakistan. To understand such convoluted diplomacy, it is important not only to understand the issues and interests of the countries involved, but also the personalities responsible for decision making. The foreign policies of India and Pakistan during this era were linked to the contrasting personalities, deep-seated fears, and worldviews of three monumental leaders. On the Pakistani side, it was Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and after his death, Field Marshal Ayub Khan. In India, Jawaharlal Nehru was the last word, being not only the Prime Minister but also the External Affairs Minister himself. So let's look at Jinnah first. Muhammad Ali Jinnah was the founder of Pakistan, the Quaid-e-Azam, and the prime mover behind its formation. Jinnah was a Western educated lawyer who had spent his formative years in Britain. As per Pakistani author Hassan Abbas, he was more British than the British. Ironically, he owed his initial rise in power to his image as the great ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity. However, once he committed to the creation of Pakistan, Jinnah proved to be an unsentimental, razor-sharp geopolitical strategist with a single-minded goal. Jinnah recognized very early that his new, geographically fractured country, which inherited the vulnerable northwest frontier but along with meager resources, could not survive without external aid from a powerful patron. Being thoroughly pragmatic himself, Jinnah knew that America would act in American interest and not as a bodyguard for Pakistan against India. He therefore skillfully marketed Pakistan to the United States. When Margaret Burke White, an American journalist, asked Jinnah a month after Pakistan was born whether he hoped to enlist technical or financial assistance from America, Jinnah answered, "America needs Pakistan more than Pakistan needs America. Pakistan is the pivot of the world as we are placed, the frontier on which the future position of the world resolves." Then, she writes, Jinnah leaned towards me, dropping his voice to a confidential note. "Russia is not so far away. America is now awakened," he said with a satisfied smile. United States should be interested in pouring money and arms into Pakistan. If Russia walks in here, he concluded, the whole world is menaced. The journalist notes perceptively that Jinnah's most frequent used technique in the struggle for his new nation had been playing off opponent against opponent. Evidently, this technique was now to be extended into foreign policy. Across the newly drawn border stood India's Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. If Jinnah was the pragmatic realist, Nehru was the philosophical idealist. As per a study prepared by the staff of the National Security Council of the US shortly after independence, I quote, "Jawaharlal Nehru, Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, is the creator and chief exponent of India's foreign policy. Proud, gifted and moody, he dreams of making India a great power while he concentrates on the economic and social development of his people. Contradictions arising from his racial background, Western education, innate feelings of personal superiority and proud and obstinate character make dealing with him very difficult. However, to deal with India, one has to deal with Nehru. Possessor of a powerful personality, he has a tremendous influence over India's masses and is the single greatest force in Congress party and in the Indian government, both of which he completely dominates. The strongest element in Nehru's foreign policy is the desire for peace, which Nehru and his associates consider a prerequisite to achievement of essential economic improvement. Nehru and the other Indian leaders believe that the only way to avoid war is to avoid alignment with either the Soviet Union and its satellites or the United States and its allies. Furthermore, Indian leaders are drawn to communist China. End quote. Paul G. Hoffman, who was the president of the Ford Foundation, visited India and met Nehru, and on his return in April 1953 wrote in a letter to the Secretary of State John Dulles, I quote, Jawaharlal Nehru, Prime Minister of India, as everyone knows, is a complicated person. He is supersensitive both as to himself and his country, rather ready to take offense at what he considers a slight, even though one is not intended. He believes that as the undisputed leader of the largest free state in Asia, his counsel should be sought by the UN, USA and UK before important policy decisions are made. As one of his ministers told me, you don't need to follow his advice, but you should ask for it. This supersensitiveness also affects Nehru's attitude towards foreign aid. He recognizes the rather desperate need for help, but he will not be supplicant. He will welcome aid, but only if it comes to India as an equal among equals. End quote. Finally, we have Pakistan's Field Marshal Ayub Khan, who took power in a 1958 military coup. His father was a Risaldar Major in Hodson's Horse, a cavalry regiment in the British Army. He graduated from Aligarh Muslim University before being selected for Sandhurst. His military career during World War II is wrapped in controversy. He was originally from the Punjab Regiment. Major General Joginder Singh, who belonged to the same battalion as him, in his book Behind the Scenes, writes that the GOC Major General T.W. Rees had removed Ayub from command of his battalion in Burma for displaying tactical timidity. This episode is borne out by the prominent mention of it in a confidential note prepared by the Commonwealth Relations Office of the British government after Ayub Khan seized power in 1958. The note, declassified in recent years, is reproduced in an article in the Daily Star, a link to which I have included in the sources in the description. After being removed from command, he was transferred to another regiment, which was temporarily razed and disbanded soon after the Second World War. I would not like to mention the name of the regiment, but listeners may refer to the link for the details. This blot on Ayub's career, however, is not mentioned in any source from Pakistan. It is highly probable that Ayub, after rising in rank, ensured this inconvenient detail was erased from the records. General Ayub was thoroughly westernized and had an absolute disdain for the chaotic squabbling of politicians. As a brigadier, he was assigned to the Punjab boundary force during partition, where this contempt for inept civilian governance intensified. His rise to power as Pakistan's military dictator is discussed in detail in the previous episode. Ayub shared Jinnah's belief that Pakistan's survival depended on achieving military parity with India. He also shared Jinnah's willingness to trade Pakistan's sovereignty for American weapons. In 1953, he bluntly told US Assistant Secretary of State Henry Byrod, "Our army can be your army if you want." Ayub approached foreign policy entirely through a military lens. Driven by Ayub Khan and a small group of generals and bureaucrats, Pakistan aggressively courted the United States. By 1955, Pakistan had joined SEATO and the Baghdad Pact, which later came to be known as CENTO. and had signed a mutual defense treaty with the United States, becoming what was famously dubbed America's most allied ally in Asia. But there was a great paradox in this alliance. United States and Pakistan were sleeping in the same bed but dreaming different dreams. Washington armed Pakistan to create a northern tier of containment against the Soviet Union. But Pakistani leaders explicitly joined these anti-communist pacts to build up their military strength against India. As a former Pakistani Prime Minister Chaudhry Muhammad Ali stated in 1956, I quote, "The hope of resolving Kashmir tangled to Pakistan's satisfaction through acquisition of military strength by joining Baghdad and Sito pacts is the very raison d'etre for Pakistan to remain a member of these pacts." End quote. When American officials asked for assurances that US weapons would not be used against India, Pakistani leaders scoffed privately. Ayub's rejoinder always was, the arms were not there to be stored in cotton wool, but that they would be used when and if Pakistan thought her security was threatened. Decades later, in 2009, Pakistan's ambassador to the United States summarized this mindset perfectly in an interview. There is no bullet that has been invented that Pakistan can be given to shoot at the terrorists that cannot be used in case there is a war with India. From New Delhi, the peace-loving Nehru watched Pakistan's militarization and alliances with absolute fury. He felt Pakistan's entry into Western alliance brought the Cold War to the doorstep of the subcontinent. India realized that Pakistan's aim was to put pressure on her over Kashmir and to encircle her with a ring of hostile alliances. In 1954, Nehru declared that US military aid to Pakistan changed the entire context of the Kashmir dispute. Since one of the parties in the dispute, that is Pakistan, was allied to a member empowered with a veto in the Security Council, the UN was no longer a level playing field in his view. The treaties spurred an Indian search for new sources of military strength to counter American influence on the subcontinent, opening the doors for closer Indo-Soviet ties. For Sito also disturbed the Soviets, with 7 countries stretching from the US to the Philippines hostile to them. The advantage of Indian non-alignment were not lost on the Russians. It induced them to support the Indian stand on Kashmir. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev visited India in 1955 and explicitly declared that Kashmir was an integral part of the Republic of India. He assured India that he would use Soviet veto at the UN to protect New Delhi from Western pressures on Kashmir. The geopolitical situation changed drastically in October 1962 when the Chinese launched a massive invasion into Ladakh and Nifa in India. They pushed back the outnumbered and ill-equipped Indian troops and occupied the areas claimed by it across the disputed boundary. In his idealism and quest for peace, Nehru had actively courted Communist China, the other Asian giant. He believed that friendship and cooperation between the two countries was in the interest of both. He was therefore willing to brush contentious issues like the border dispute under the carpet and took Chinese reciprocity to his friendly overtures at its face value. The attack by China undermined all his ideals like non-alignment and peaceful coexistence. He was forced to abandon his ideological pride and sent desperate letters to US President John Kennedy, begging for American fighter squadrons and bombers to protect Indian cities. President Kennedy, responding to the urgent call, ordered the airlift of enough US military equipment to arm and outfit 10 new northern tier divisions of Indian troops. In Pakistan, the reaction to this US largesse towards India was sheer unadulterated outrage. For a decade, Pakistan had hitched its wagon to Washington. In return for military aid, it had virtually compromised its sovereignty, allowing the US to clandestinely use its air bases to spy on the Soviet Union. In the bargain, it had earned the wrath of Soviet Union. There had been a serious incident in May 1960 when an American spy plane was shot down by Soviet Union over its airspace. The American pilot, Francis Gary Powers, was captured alive. He revealed that the plane had taken off from Badabir Air Base near Peshawar in Pakistan. This airbase was built in 1959 and was secretly used by the US military. An angry President Khrushchev warned Pakistan not to play with fire. 2 months after this incident, Khrushchev personally visited Kabul and openly supported Afghanistan's claim for Pukhtonistan. And India, who had remained aloof from any kind of alliances all this while, was now readily receiving the same largesse that Pakistan had earned at such a high cost. During the height of Sino-Indian War, Kennedy had written to Ayub, urging him to make a positive gesture by promising not to attack India, allowing New Delhi to move its troops to the Chinese front. Ayub reluctantly agreed, keeping his borders quiet. In retrospect, many in the Pakistani military felt Ayub had squandered their golden opportunity to take Kashmir by force while India was on its knees against China. And what was Pakistan's reward for this restraint? Once the Chinese unilaterally declared a ceasefire, the US and UK briefly pressured Nehru to negotiate on Kashmir. Nehru stonewalled the talks and the West dropped the issue. Pakistan felt like a faithful wife who had been cheated on. Ayub Khan wrote a bitter letter to Kennedy, arguing that the massive influx of Western arms to India would ultimately be used against his country. This did not alter the US decision. Realizing that United States would never fully back Pakistan against India, Ayub started to think in terms of lessening Pakistan's almost total dependence on them. He authorized his foreign minister Bhutto to sign an agreement with the Soviet Union, allowing it to explore for oil and gas in Pakistan. Bhutto also prevailed over Ayub to give Pakistan support to China for a seat in the United Nations in place of Taiwan. In March 1963, Pakistan and China signed a border agreement under which Pakistan ceded roughly 2,050 square miles of the remote Shaksam Valley in northern Kashmir, territory that rightfully belonged to India. Not too long thereafter, Pakistan went ahead and signed an aviation accord with China, coming further close to it and away from United States. During a visit to Pakistan in 1964, the Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai rewarded them by openly throwing China's weight behind Pakistan's demand for a plebiscite in Kashmir. The US and Pakistani policies were now on different pages. Pakistan saw India as its biggest threat. The US, however, wanted to support India to counter China. At the same time, Pakistan started looking to China for partnering with against India. This created a cycle of conflicting interests that kept getting worse over time. By the end of 1964, the stage for the next great event was set. India, wiser after its defeat by China, was engaged in a massive, rapid military modernization program. Pakistan's military higher command, observing this build-up, developed a dangerous now or never mentality. They calculated that if they did not use their qualitative edge in American-supplied Patton tanks and Sabre jets to seize Kashmir soon, India's military expansion would permanently close this window of opportunity. Driven by hubris, armed with American weaponry, and emboldened by their new Chinese alliance, the Pakistani leadership prepared to throw caution to the wind. The events that unfolded subsequently led to the 1965 war, but more about that in our next episode. Thank you for joining us for episode 6. Please consider subscribing to the podcast and do share the link with your friends who may find it interesting. See you next time.